Good day, everyone. So today's video is a little different than my norm in terms of following up from a classic assignment or exercise, anything with that. This relates to a project that I've tried to kickstart a couple different times before COVID, during COVID, and now still during COVID, just a little later. But it relates to Google Street View and using that as a method for systematic social observation. This stems from a lot of Odgers et al. Original work using this and using the images to go and do similar to what Dr. Sampson did with Chicago in the Chicago Project of Human Development, going through and coding a lot of signs of physical and social disorder on the streets. Google has made this incredibly easier for us to not actually be on site driving up and down all the streets, but we can take some of our analyses from prior programs or different studies and take it into Google Street View or Google Earth in this Street View to look at the images and code from that. With that, there is a prior video on this YouTube channel a student put together for me using an Excel Dropdown Inventory List of how to go through Google Earth and use the Street View to code streets. What became abundantly clear after trying this a couple times is the list is way too long to get done in a timely manner. It's so tedious and honestly just burns students out, myself out, to where a current project that I'm working with Dr. Casey Harris on in Little Rock, we wanted to approach this again but try to streamline and make the list or inventory for being coded much smaller. And when I was getting down and ready to record this video on Monday, and today's Thursday, there was a tweet that actually linked to this article that you see in front of you, specifically on using Google Street View imagery and looking at the reliability of it. And it's, for my luck, is also CPTED related, crime prevention through environmental design. So I think it's a nice little way of people are still using this. It's growing in popularity, especially over COVID when travel and everything else with that had pretty much come to a halt. It is a way to still observe and look at certain areas related to crime or other social indicators or health indicators and see what's different between these and other ones. So you can do a comparison, or if you want to do an inventory of a certain area, it's possible to do that. For the sake of time, I have recorded this video, honestly, probably a half dozen times now. The last one I thought was great, but then I had both screens going, and I didn't realize Kaltura would not combine those into one video. So to get to where we're at now, if you have a spatial GIS background, all I did in ArcGIS Pro was take a street layer that identified 78 streets that Casey and I wanted additional coding on. And for that, we went into our toolboxes and did an export to a KML. A KML, KMZ file is what we'll read into Google Earth. With that, it brings in the same symbology with it. Your attribute table, most of that comes with it as well when you click on specific streets, and unique IDs and all that kind of stuff, so we're in good shape. To give you an idea of what we did to make our lives easier for this project is we took our long list from a drop-down inventory sheet in Excel, moved it to Google Forms, and we did this mostly because we're using Google Earth. Google Forms goes well with it, and also I like the responses that it generates for us. So if I were to open this in our spreadsheet option, and you can see the one I already did about a half hour ago, it comes in a nice table format with all the codes in it for us. So we can easily export this into other software packages and gives us the ability to take it and use it relatively quickly, and if we need to clean it, we can. I will say Qualtrics would make our lives a bit easier when we came to this, mostly when it comes to some of the if statements. So if you select one answer, we can ask a follow-up or additional questions based on one selection. Google Forms does have that built in, but it's not as easy to essentially aesthetically navigate through it when you have people coding based on this. It's not as good of a flow. Qualtrics is very good for that, and they're known for surveys and all of that. Google's making progress, so it's getting there. But given kind of the structure of this, it's also a nice example of all of what we're using today, be it Google Forms, the Sheets option, even in Google Earth Pro or Google Earth, it's free. I haven't had to pay for this. I just have an account with Google, like most people do through a Gmail account. So you have this built-in functionality that is pretty handy to use. So with that, I'm going to go over an example for essentially the coders, other intern students, myself, and when Dr. Harris goes through it as well, to give you some thought process of how we go about coding some of this. And if there are questions, we do build it into our, if I come back to the questions, and I'll go through this here in a second. At the end, we do have it built in of if you want to leave anything, like if you want to answer it, then there's some uncertainty, or you want us or someone else to look at it, we have that built in of tell us, hey, the question, the part that you're confused with or just unsure about. And then at the last little bit, was this a practice one of you just getting the hang of the questionnaire kind of part, or is this final? When we look in this sheet part at the end, this is an easy way for us to just apply a filter of, hey, was this practice or a final one? If it's final, we can take it and just go use it. And we have multiple people coding, so we can see if there's discrepancies across to look at the reliability of responses across multiple coders. This is what helps us in this process. So that's why you see some of these at the beginning, some of the admin level data. Now I'll briefly go through this and I'll hop back and forth between Google Earth and this form to fill it out. I'll do it probably a bit quicker than usual, just for the nature of what we're doing. If you have multiple screens, obviously I would have this form on my other screen, and that's the video I originally recorded, but it created two separate videos instead of combining them into one. But to go through this, we have some admin level in section 1. Put in your email address, today's date. Every street's going to have a unique ID that I'll show you in Google Earth that you would transfer over. And then the good part is when you take your little person, the yellow person in Google Earth, and you drop it down on the street, it'll tell you the imagery date. So you just put the month and year there, so we can record it. There is the chance that one street, for whatever reason, might have two different months, years attached to it. So just put those in there. That just allows us to see the variation, because some streets that are more heavily trafficked are going to probably have newer imagery than some of the side streets and older streets. That some of the ones I've clicked on and gone through go back to even 2007, 2014, so many years ago. But with that, we kind of focus on, I would say, 5 primary sections and not too many questions within each. So we're asking the condition of the street. Are there cars parked along the street? Is there vehicle traffic on the street when you're coding it? And then since most of the street files are going to stop at an intersection, I say most of the time, and that's another rant on another video, are there the presence of stop lights or stop signs on that specific street? And that's not asking you for the side streets, but specifically on that street. If there are sidewalks, what's the condition of them? And then we'll get into, are there street signs specific to promoting organized community activities, speed limit, crosswalk, some of the ones that we oftentimes see. Bus stops, Little Rock does not have transit via train or anything like that, so they only rely on bus stops. Are there police-related ones, be it DARE, Crime Stoppers, Drug-Free Zone? Are there anything related to almost the law enforcement side of it? Are there signs in another language? Unreadable ones, essentially they're too graffitied or weathered or too old to really say what it is. And if there's just other types of sign, there could be turning ones, that kind of stuff. Just check that, and we can always take a look at it if we need to. This is a question that I just added in as I was going through again. And this is one of those that, as you go through it, you might see some of these smaller, like almost essentially like yard signs, or what you might think of if for a politician type sign. You stick the stakes in the ground, it's on next to the sidewalk, but almost advertising for beer, alcohol, tobacco, those type of things. If there are benches around, are there advertising for alcohol, tobacco, and when I say e-cigarettes or vaping, anything like that, or if there's a billboard, is that present on that as well? Then we get into 2 questions on physical signs of disorder. The first one's really looking at garbage litter on the streets, public sidewalk, the public space itself. And then is there presence of graffiti, be it building signs or on walls? And I put cannot evaluate on a couple of these of if the images that you're looking at are a bit blurry and you can't tell, go ahead and click you cannot evaluate, and we can always take another look at that to see if there is graffiti or if we need to do something else with that one. Then infrastructure, this is getting at what's located on that street, be it residential, commercial, a lot of them probably going to be a combination thereof. Recreational parks, courts, that type of thing. And for institutions, think truly schools and churches. Are there abandoned or heavily deteriorated buildings that are oftentimes boarded up? Vacant lots, treat this as truly a vacant lot. There's nothing built on it. If there are residences, the type of residences, and then the condition of them. Yes, some of this is perception based, but that's why we have multiple coders to help us with this side of it. And then from there, getting at some of our criminogenic or CGAs and potentially protective establishments, but what's present on that street, be it church to bail bondsman to fast food, check all that apply. Are those majority well kept, fair condition, deteriorating, similar to the residences, just specifically now for the businesses, institutions? And then one on, are there people present on the street? And this is children, be it playing in physical activity, sports, that kind of thing. 2 or more people essentially getting at the loitering side, hanging out on the street. People walking on the sidewalk, which you'll oftentimes will see, and they're just going to a destination. If there's people in front of the house, be it at a vehicle or a garden kind of area, front yard, in front of a business, or waiting on public transit, that's where you see the bus sign, that type of part. And then overall, some perceptions of how safe would you feel living in that area or that street, and then walking at night. And then how would you characterize that based on essentially your income level? How would you assess that perception? And the last 2 ones are if you're unsure about anything, and if this one was a practice or truly a final one that you're happy with. So we're good to go there. And now I'll go through the process of doing one together so we can kind of walk through it. So I'm going to go ahead and put my email in there. That's the wrong, I should not have generated that. Today's date, and then I'm going to close the door because my dogs are starting to play. But now if we want to find a street ID, this is where we go ahead and open Google Earth. And I haven't loaded the file yet, so when I send it to you and you open it, you'll go ahead and go up to File, Open. Wherever you save this file to, you'll just direct your computer to find it. You'll click that to bring it in, and then Google Earth will automatically zoom in on that part for you, and you'll be good to go from there. Give it a second because it might take a bit more depending on what computer you're on to load. And I apologize if you hear the squeaking in the background. My puppy thought it would be a great time to get a squeaking toy. But with that, you can see the file's loaded here, and if I hit this arrow to drop it down and then do it again, it's actually going to load the 78 streets that I know are part of this file. If you scroll down, I was trying to make it easier changing the color scheme so every street would be a bit different and not everything would be the same color. But it is difficult to see this when you have all of the other layers on, but that also makes it easier when you're coding. But if you click on any one of these, say, I'm just going to pick a random one here, 6849, this is that unique identifier. And this is, where's that one at? Here it is. So if I click on the actual number, it generates this. So I can zoom in a bit more for it. And then if you're familiar with Google itself, if you come over here to drag and enter Street View, I'm going to click on this yellow guy or person, drop it here, and you can see that this little line here that is pink is the start at this intersection here. So I'll come back a little bit. So going this way forward is the street that I'll be coding for this specific one. So again, that's 6849. So if I come back into this part, 6849, and then I'm just going to pull this back and forth. If I look down here in the corner, we have an imagery date of 7 of 2017. So I'm going to put 07 2017. So even in this one, it's about 4 to 5 years old already. Hit next. The first couple questions are asking condition of the street, so looking at cracks, potholes, broken curbs. Are there cars parked along the street? Is there any traffic going on? And are there stop signs or stop lights? Sidewalks have the same ones, so I'm going to start with those first couple ones and just go up and down the street to get familiar with it. So you can see already there's no sidewalks on it. There is a bit of construction that was done on the street. As we go through it, there are cracks. Curb looks in decent shape right now. There are cars parked along, and that one looked like it was burnt down. And we do have a stop sign at the end as well. So for street condition, overall, I'd say it's in fair condition. So we're okay there. There's not huge potholes. There are some cracks throughout it, that type of thing, but not a lot of heavy damage to it. So if I'm coming back over here, I'd say it's in fair. There are cars parked along the street. Did not notice actual traffic on it given the size of the road. There was a stop sign. There were no sidewalks, so since they're that, you don't have to assess the value or the part of it or the condition, sorry. And then let's take a look. Are there any street signs present and any alcohol, tobacco advertising on it? So let's see. We'll go up and down it again. I didn't notice too many. There's a no parking sign, so that's why you can't have cars parked on that side. But you do see one here, but I think there's an arrow on it that points to the curb, so from that side to the curb would be my guess. Let's see how close we can get to it. Yeah, so it points in a specific direction. We do see a car bumper thrown up here. But in terms of actual street signs, we don't see any visible street signs other than parking. So for that, I would go ahead and just hit an other street sign. It's not one of these, but there is a sign, so we'll do that. Did not see any alcohol or tobacco here. So hit next. And now we're looking for garbage and litter and then graffiti itself. So let's start at one side again. And I will say the length of the streets is going to vary. Some are going to be short like this. Some might take a bit more time and effort to click through. But overall, there is some litter down in this area. Not a lot in that part. We have some construction on the house itself. I'm assuming construction with the mobile unit outside, but that's also an assumption. But we know there is some work being done there. Overall, not a lot of trash. There is some litter, but that's some leaves as well, leaves. As we click through, and just I'm double clicking to go upwards and then just dragging and clicking to go around. We do have some garbage, I would assume I would call this, if it's on the curb like this versus the trash and recycling up there. But not a lot. So I would say we're still not dealing with a heavy part to it. I would put light here, and I did not see any graffiti. Hit next. And now infrastructure, I did not notice any types of businesses at all. So we know there's residential. I'm going to go through again to see if there was a vacant lot. I don't think there was. There's a little construction going on there for that home. But other than that, they mostly all look one-story ranch style. So for the next question, I want to ask the type, single family or single story. And we look at the condition. Since there's not too many on the street, but a majority of them are in good condition. You can see based on the yards, they're well manicured in that respect. They're not overgrown. They are freshly mowed. There even looks like a little garden area back here. Nothing too long going on. So overall, the condition, you don't see broken windows, anything related to that. So for that, I would say majority are in fair condition. We did have one that was in questionable, and that's where not necessarily sure if they're doing construction on it, and that's why they have the mobile mini unit out there, or if that's just the housing itself and they're using that as storage. Did not notice any types of businesses present, truly just a residential street. And since there's none on it, hit NA there, because it's truly, we're just assessing the residential part to it. If there are businesses on the street that you're coding, that's where it takes a bit more time to just look at the signage of what type. Is it a bar? Is it a restaurant? What you're looking at to get a feel for that. And then I'm hitting next. And our next question comes up to, are there people visible on the street? I haven't noticed anyone as we've clicked through this a few different times now. So I'm clicking no visible people, and I'll pull that back over. Hit next. And then how would you feel if I lived here? And this, looking around, I'd feel fairly safe in terms of just how kept this street is. Again, this is a perception-based one. Everyone's going to be a bit different with it, and that's why we have different coders for this, so we can look at the perception of and the reliability of that part. So I would do fairly safe. At night, Now this is me, and this was not one of the questions. There's not a street light, and if I'm thinking at night, there's not a sidewalk. So at night, I'd probably feel a bit more unsafe than anything else. Because of that, you'd have to walk on the road more than anything else. So I'd say fairly unsafe for myself. And then characterized by, given these are mostly ranch style, I wouldn't say this is well kept. I would say it's moderate means, to where you have the higher end of wealthy, higher income, to comfortable off, to moderate to poor. I would say moderate myself. Hit next. Anything I was unsure about. For this one, I didn't have any notes, but say I wanted to have someone assess a potential car that's broken down on the street. Car broken down on the street. So is it parked? Is it broken down? The condition of that. That's tough to say because it's also in front of a driveway, so it is tough to say. There's a big judgment call there. And then the last part to it would be, is this practice or final? This obviously is practice. We're just going through it. If you're comfortable with it all and you've gone through it, go ahead and hit final and then submit. And then that kicks it over to the responses in this table, and you can see now that I have a second one that I just did with a unique identifier here for that street. So I did 2 different ones based on that. But if you're familiar with Google Earth, that's great. A couple other tricks to get used to. If you want to exit Street View, if you come up here to the top right, you can just click Exit Street View, and it brings you out much more to a bird's eye view to it, so you can see what's going on. This is what it looks like if you were to use Google My Maps and that side of it. Trust me, I would love to use My Maps, but it doesn't give you the Street View option. The other part is you can uncheck it after you've done that street and it takes it off, or if you scroll to the top and uncheck them all. And if you wanted to go through each one by one, and as you complete one, you check it off, that's fine. You can do it that way. The key part is just to save your project or your place itself, so you can save to My Places, so you can always come back to that same file and open it that way. With that, once you complete one, you can hop back in and submit another response, and you go through the same process again over and over and over again until they're all done. The good part is, for this specific file or layer, there's 78 streets, there's no duplicates, they're scattered around Little Rock, so there is going to be some variation there, and the interns are more familiar with the project itself, but it will be a pretty cool end-all spreadsheet data set that we can work with to better describe some of these streets in Little Rock. With that, if there's any questions, please reach out to me. If you want to get access to even the Google form or some of the other stuff we've developed with the drop-down list inventory, happy to share any of that or anything else we have. If not, until next time, take care.